It should be said right up front and loud and clear that I came to this film as something less than an impartial observer. When I was a child playing tennis virtually from dawn to dusk, and sometimes beyond, Björn Borg was my hero, my idol, my North Star, my role model, and my spirit animal. I taught myself how to hit forehands with ridiculous amounts of topspin in his ridiculous open stance, facing his opponent directly rather than sideways. Even more ridiculously, I persist in doing it to this day. For years, I slept with my windows open during the winter to emulate the frigid temperatures at which Borg liked to sleep. Like him, I became obsessed with my resting heart rate, often taking my pulse calmly and immediately upon waking. Borg was long rumored to have a resting heart rate of 35, though his actual rate hovered around 50. Mine didn't quite get that low, but I wasn't far off. Borg's insanely difficult to wield racket, check. His signature Fila tennis clothes and warm-ups, ditto. Sadly, when I wear these things today, people don't think I'm trying to be Björn Borg, they think I'm obsessed with the Royal Tenenbaums. As a child, McEnroe represented everything wrong, excessive, untamed, undisciplined, and out of control in life, though thankfully I grew out of this misconception once I entered something approximating the real world. So, yes, I bring baggage to this movie, which I've been looking forward to for a couple of years. Never mind, it's superb. Far from the usual boosterous can they do it yes they can sports movie that, unfortunately, we've come to expect. Borg vs. McEnroe is a taut, suspenseful, even if you know the outcome, pitch-perfect retelling of what many fans and tennis historians consider to be the greatest match ever played, the 1980 gentlemen's singles final at Wimbledon, with Icelandic-born Swedish actor Sverrir Gudnason as a spot-on Borg and Shia LaBeouf as a particularly peevish and tortured John McEnroe. First, though, we're given the backstory to both men. Borg, played, as a teen, by Borg's real-life son Leo, himself now a pro trying to make his way on the men's tour, while outwardly serene, hides his inner rage in a regimented perfectionism aided by a quirky kind of OCD. McEnroe, meanwhile, while mostly living up to the ugly American superbrat label that the British press slapped on him early on, nonetheless aims for the same sort of pure perfection as Borg. It's to Danish director Janus Metz Peterson's credit that his film is laced with a subtle through-line which telegraphs the hidden similarities shared by these seeming polar opposites. The film also boasts a wealth of spot-on details pulled from real life, from Borg and his coach Leonard Bergeland's fixation on precision racket stringing, to McEnroe's odd deference to Borg, and his noticeably less bratty behavior when facing off on the court against him. My one quibble on the accuracy front, while no one would argue that McEnroe didn't have a rich history of on-court squabbles, bitchy meltdowns, and temper tantrums, the thumbnail sketch we're given of his playing leading up to the confrontation with Borg consists of little else. Perhaps more importantly, while McEnroe did indeed rage against linesmen and umpires, the primary target for these rants wasn't usually these officials, it was himself and his own failures. Okay, armchair psychology lesson over. Everything leads up to the final 20 or so minutes, in which we're treated to a more or less blow-by-blow rendering of the 1981 Wimbledon final, the high point of which was a 34-point tie-breaker in the fourth set, during which Borg couldn't convert a single one of his 5 match points. Borg lost the tie-break in the set, but won the anticlimactic fifth set to secure his 5th consecutive Wimbledon title. The film's constrained and narrow focus is part of its strength, with all the backstory and drama clearly leading up to an epic battle royal between the two principals. All the details that don't help build this narrative can be jettisoned. There's about as much dialogue as you'll find in a Terrence Malick movie, and that's as it should be. It's a story effectively told through brooding, tantrums, and topspin. That said, I found myself yearning for the story arc to extend a bit longer. The year after this epic match, McEnroe beat Borg at Wimbledon for the first time. In my otherwise happy-go-lucky childhood, Borg's loss sparked what I would later identify as my first experience with depression. I rode my bike around my small town aimlessly for hours, not wanting to speak to anyone. When, years later, I related this story to McEnroe, he fixed me with that nervous, twitchy smile that one uses to politely fend off people who seem a bit on the far side of compos mentis. And when McEnroe beat Borg again in the final of the U.S. Open later that year, Borg walked off the court and away from the sport that made him a legend. Both men had their share of difficulties with life after tennis. Both men eventually steered themselves back into healthy and seemingly happy lives. McEnroe, who briefly coached the U.S. Davis Cup team, has also worked variously as an author, a talk show host, an art dealer, and is one of the best television analysts working in tennis today. He also founded his own tennis academy. Borg, while more subdued in his pursuits, founded a wildly successful underwear and sportswear line. As a postscript to Borg vs. McEnroe notes, the two became close friends later in life. A dozen or so years ago, when Borg was about to sell his Wimbledon trophies and a couple of his winning rackets at auction, McEnroe called him up and asked, simply, "What's up? Have you gone mad?" Borg cancelled the sale. All that, of course, is beyond the scope of this film, which is a razor-sharp, meticulously recreated, and finely acted tour de force. But here's hoping for